collaboration with the Cyprus Mail, this is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
This week, we find out about moves to enable NGOs to mount legal challenges to decisions that impact the environment.
Even the existing laws were sidelined either by the government or by the local authorities, usually by the governments.
There's some good news on the bird front.
Based on renewed interest and research and relevant scientific publications, looking at the plumage of the bird, looking more at the fact that it actually has a very distinctive call compared to the European Scops owl, and deciding on the basis of that no, actually, this is a special little Cypriot owl that probably exists as a population of its own in Cyprus.
And the Computer Society is looking for young hackers to represent Cyprus at a European competition.
So we're talking about high school students, university students, soldiers, and even some professionals that are still in the age limit that are talented in cybersecurity, what we refer to as hackers, but on the ethical approach.
Earlier this week, Terra Cypria, a well-known environmental NGO on the island, hosted a seminar on access to justice for protection of the environment. The whole idea was to give NGOs who are active in environmental issues the chance to see where they stood, particularly with regard to justice on these issues. Joining us this week is a trustee of Terra Cypria, Lagis Zavalis. So, Lagis, why was this necessary?
Unfortunately, the Cyprus constitution constrains the right of NGOs to appeal against government decisions or any kind of administrative decisions, be it by the central government or by local authorities, which have a negative impact on the environment. Now, this is due to one article of our constitution, Article 146, which prescribes that for any action, the party that initiates it should have the so-called legal interest. Now, in the past, a number of court cases have unfortunately confined or restricted this right to people who have a financial interest. NGOs, as you know, do not have a financial interest. They just care about the environment. This, from the studies we have carried out, is an exception to the rule prevailing in the European Union. Practically all European countries we have studied their legal systems take a different course. They allow NGOs who are dealing already with the environment to object to decisions that have a negative impact. So we're trying to change this. First of all, by changing the actual way of thinking among the legal profession, and then in finding a practical way to pursue a change to this rule that exists at the moment. Because the way the constitutional provision has been translated has become part of our case law. And all future cases follow this rule. We want to change that.
How do you go about doing that?
We had a seminar, it was on Monday, the 17th of February, in cooperation with the University of Cyprus. We had two legal experts, both of them university professors, speaking to an audience of about 150 persons, which was quite a good turnout. University students, obviously, but members of NGOs and also members of the legal profession were there, which was very encouraging. Now, the first speaker was a very well-known professor at the University of Athens, Dr. Gligeria Siouti, whose books on this subject are very well known. Some of them, in fact, are basic textbooks in universities. The second speaker was Dr. Ioanna Hagianni, who is a lecturer at the University of Cyprus, and her specialty is environmental law. And the first speaker, Dr. Siouti, analyzed to us the provisions of the Greek constitution, and also she made some references to what appears to be the case in other European countries. And of course, Dr. Hagianni expounded on the provisions of the Cypriot law. Now, the conclusion is that practically all European countries, Greece included, but not Cyprus, take a completely different course. And we were given a number of cases in which NGOs successfully appealed against government decisions that had affected even communities away from where the NGOs were based, or on issues that were not really relevant to the actual NGO. One prime example I can cite is a bar association in central Greece appealed against a proposed power plant on one of the islands that was going to throw its waste into the sea. And that island lied about 200 or 300 miles away from where the bar association was located, around the central Greek towns. And they won the case. They said because the sea is a benefit that accrues to all people, you cannot say you have to be a neighbor of a neighboring island to object. And many other cases like that.
What was the reaction from the people sort of listening to all of this? Because particularly, as you say, some of the NGOs in Cyprus have come up against brick walls when they've tried to stop infrastructure particularly and other things very close to or even next door to Natura 2000 sites. We've had so many, dare I say, scandals of the government pushing ahead with projects without proper environmental studies. Would a change to our law mean that these could be challenged and probably successfully challenged?
Well, it will mean a change definitely, and this is what we're pursuing. In my introductory speech, for example, I gave a number of examples where even the existing laws were sidelined either by the government or by the local authorities, usually by the governments, by professing the so-called public interest, which is never explained really or adequately, supported. In this respect, I mentioned that the European Commission sent last November a very stern letter to our government demanding an explanation within 2 months. The deadline has already expired, so I don't know whether an answer has been given. In that letter, the Commission cites no less than 42 cases of projects which were carried out, and here I'm quoting from the letter, without performing a study on the potential repercussions of that particular project. Now, this study on the potential repercussions is a requirement by law. And as the European Commission said in its letter, of the 42 projects, 17 were executed without this study being carried out, or even without any other kind of license. And it goes on in its letter, and now I'm quoting from the letter, meaning illegal activities. That was very stern. This letter, by the way, was published in one of the daily newspapers here. Otherwise, it's a private correspondence and is not up for the public. But this newspaper last November somehow got hold of the letter.
So it's in the public domain. Now, was anybody from the government at this event?
There was a lady from the Environment Department, but she didn't pick up on this point. And in any case, the problem here is that the Environment Department may give one opinion against, let's say, project, but there is a loophole in the law that the Council of Ministers can override it. The other interesting case that, again, the letter mentioned is there was a special protection zone for fauna and flora, but mostly for fauna, which was declared, and it happened to be next to a golf course. So the government gave permission to build a road inside this special protection area, but before giving its permission, it went through the motions of this scientific committee studying the impact of the environment. The scientific committee said it shouldn't be done, ruled against it, because among others, it would have a negative effect on the fauna we try to protect. The submission went to the government, and the cabinet overruled it, and the road was built. And for all these things and many others, as I said, a total of 22, the European Commission now is asking the government to give an explanation.
The problem with all of this, if you ask me, Lagis, is the fact that once this has been done, you can't undo it, can you? Because you've created the damage, and even if you pulled up the road, it wouldn't go back to the status quo ante.
No.
So it's really important, considering the size of Cyprus, is it not, that we get these changes made as soon as possible. Can the European Commission, the European Union help in any way on this?
The European Union can bring pressure. This is what they are doing. And really the only hope lies in stepping up this pressure from the European Union. They can even take legal measures. It's not always effective and it all takes time. That's why we firmly believe that we should stop this from the outset, locally. Local NGOs must be able, since they have a vested interest in protecting the environment, which, as you know, is shrinking and is already under danger, not much of it is left. We are seeking to have a say and a legal standing in objecting to decisions that, based on, of course, scientific evidence, not just because we think like it.
We're going to have to wrap this up in a minute.
Yes.
Just tell me how this is going to be achieved and how long it's going to take, because that's the other thing. We've already got other proposals in the pipeline which are well documented. They will have a very detrimental impact on the environment around those projects. And if this is going to take the usual time it takes for an alteration to be made to a law in Parliament, there won't be much left of Cyprus by the time it gets passed, will there?
Good. Two things. One of the Green Party representatives was there, said that they had tabled a motion in the Parliament to change the constitutional provision I mentioned in order to allow the environment to be an issue on which you can take action. This, even if this were to happen, it will take years, as you know, because it will be fierce opposition. Our aim now is we're making some adjustments to our statutes at the moment, and we're waiting for the confirmation of the changes. And we plan to take legal action at the administrative court here. We expect to be rejected on the strength of the existing case law, but then we're going to appeal to the European Court of Justice in Luxembourg.
Now, if that gets passed, that could become new case law in Cyprus, is that right?
Yes, these are objectives. We have to change the case law. On our side, we have a number of eminent jurists on the island who have written about this subject, and they are calling for a change to the interpretation of the constitutional provision I've mentioned. Therefore, we have legal assets on our side as well. But we don't have yet a court case. Some of the court cases that were rejected were either badly prepared or it was because the provision of the Constitution was interpreted in a conservative manner. We expect the same fate to befall on us, but we aim to go to Luxembourg and ask for new ruling that will overturn the rulings here. But as you know, European law precedes local law, and this is our only hope. European law is over and above the Constitution even. And this is our plan.
Let's hope it works. That is Lagis Zavalis, trustee of Terra Cypria, talking there about the moves afoot to allow NGOs which are active on environmental issues to take matters to court.
Keep up to date with events in Cyprus and around the world with the Cyprus News Digest.
Well, it's not often that we have good news on the bird front in Cyprus, but it's recently been realised that the Cyprus scops owl is a full species in its own right, endemic to the island. Martin Helikar from BirdLife Cyprus joins us to explain the significance of this news.
Yeah, as you say, Rosie, it's not often we have very nice news on the bird front. So, of course, nothing has actually changed in the real world, as it were. You know, the Cyprus scops owl is what it always was, or at least has been for the last few centuries.
Why did we think that it was the same as the ones in Europe? And how did we find out it wasn't?
Well, it's a very good question and a very interesting question. So the whole science of taxonomy, as it's called, which is deciding what is a separate species and what isn't, or what is a subspecies, is a very interesting one. And it's also one that is evolving all the time in the same way that species are in the real world. So nowadays, for example, there's a lot more work done on the genetics of species, just because it's become a lot easier to do genetic studies. There's a lot more work done on the distribution of species and their movement. So basically we have a lot more information in our hands when we're looking at species and trying to make these decisions. There's a lot of interest in what is a species and what is a subspecies and what is a separate species, because this is very important in terms of biodiversity. It's an important element of the biodiversity that we're always talking about and how important that is to preserve. So as I said at the start, the Cyprus scops owl is what it always has been, at least as far as we know, for maybe hundreds of years. But it was defined until very recently as a subspecies, so distinct from the European scops owl, but not distinct enough for us to assume that it doesn't interbreed with the European scops owl. So it was Otus scops cyprius, so it had a third little name which signified that it was distinct, but it wasn't what it is now, which is Otus cyprius, a pure Cypriot. So now, based on renewed interest and research and relevant scientific publications, looking at the plumage of the bird, looking more at the fact that it actually has a very distinctive call compared to the European scops owl, and deciding on the basis of that no, actually, this is a special little Cypriot owl. It's minute, it really is minute. A special little Cypriot owl that probably exists as a population of its own in Cyprus, interbreeding with other Cypriot scops owls, but not with the European scops owl.
Well, I was going to ask you, before you mentioned its size, whether I was right in thinking that this was the teeny owl that we all have seen pictures of.
Yeah.
And since it is, wouldn't it be rather unusual for it to have bred with other European owls? Because we're an island a long way from, well, presumably a long way for a bird of this size to cross the water.
We are, and that's a very good question. But in the case of the scops owl, it is a migrant species. So it spends the winter in warmer climes, including our population, a proportion. We don't know what proportion seems to leave the island to go south for the winter. We also know that some of them stay. This is another area that needs to be looked into. And the scops owl population in Europe as a whole mostly leaves Europe and goes south for the winter. So there is a movement, and we know there is a migration of the European scops owl through Cyprus. How do we know that? We know that because we know they get caught on lime sticks, unfortunately, and in nets. So we do have data on that. So it seems that we're talking about a migrating species, which in the case of Cyprus is a partially migrating population. So there is interaction, there is contact between the Cyprus scops owl in its new endemic status and the European scops owl.
But does that contact happen at a time of year which isn't mating time?
No, it could happen at a time of year that's mating time, because migration, as you know, happens in spring and autumn. So in spring, certainly, that's a time when these birds are interested in finding a mate and finding a nesting hole and producing young. But the key thing here is that the Cyprus scops owl has a different call. The European scops owl has a single call note, a single whistle. It's not a complex call. Whereas the Cyprus scops owl has a double call note. So we can assume with reasonable safety that the European scops owls coming through, hearing a Cyprus scops owl, think, oh, that's not a mate for me. That's a different call. That, in combination with the fact that there are some plumage differences, subtle, but they're there, and I'm sure they're very noticeable at the scops owl level, as in to other scops owls, means that we can be quite confident, and it's always difficult to be 100% confident, let's be clear on that, it's difficult to be 100% confident on these things, but we can be reasonably confident that the European scops owl and the Cyprus scops owl do not actually interbreed. So therefore they're on different evolutionary paths, they're on different trajectories, if you like, and they're distinct species. And we can be confident that the Cyprus scops owl is that much better adapted to the habitats and the ecosystems of Cyprus. So it's very important, if you look at the big picture, that we preserve that. Apart from the fact that, wow, we should be proud of having a third full endemic species of Cyprus. It's a great thing to talk about and a great thing to look after and a great thing to be proud of. We have this gorgeous little owl that is uniquely Cypriot and proud.
What are the other two?
The other two have long been recognised as endemic species of Cyprus, and they're the Cyprus wheatear, which comes here for the warmer months of the year and goes down south to Sudan for the winter, and the Cyprus warbler, which, similarly to the scops owl, migrates only partly, it seems. Some of the population will leave and go to places like Israel, Sinai, even as far down as Sudan for the winter, whereas another portion of the population will stay in Cyprus all year round.
Do you know why some migrate and some don't?
No, that's not clear. I mean, obviously there are advantages and disadvantages we can postulate to migration. So migration is a risky business, crossing the sea when you're a minute warbler. That takes a lot of energy, a lot of effort. There are risks, a bit of bad weather, you end up in the sea, you're done. But there is the advantage that you're then in a warmer place for the winter with more insects and a more clement condition, and especially at night, so easier to survive. So you have to balance those things, and it's probably something that is perhaps, well, I say probably, it could be a shifting thing. We don't know whether the population is moving towards all becoming sedentary or all becoming migratory, or it's stable in this mixed condition. The truth is, it's something that could do with more research.
And I'm sure there will be more research. I know a lot of people come from Europe to bird watch in Cyprus now, because we do have not only our endemic species, but a pretty wide selection that pass through when they're on their migrations to Northern Europe or Africa or whatever. Will this be a boost, do you think, to bird watchers, or twitchers, I think they call them, to come here and try and see this brand new endemic scops owl?
It certainly won't harm. It certainly won't harm the idea that you can come here. Cyprus is a great place to come for a bird watching holiday, and we work very hard as BirdLife Cyprus to promote that. And knowing that in addition to all the great variety of birds we have coming for the winter or passing through in spring and autumn, and even in summertime, we have the nice unique species that breed here, and we've now added one more species to that list. It certainly can't harm.
Martin Helikar from BirdLife Cyprus. And check out their website, it's birdlifecyprus.org.
You can subscribe to the Cyprus News Digest on iTunes for free and get the program downloaded to your phone or tablet so you can listen anytime, anywhere.
The Cyprus Computer Society is organising its third Cyprus Cyber Security Challenge in early March. Joining us on this week's programme is the project officer, Toumazis Toumazi. So, how did this start? Let's go back to the beginning and the first one, because it's been very successful, I think, for Cyprus.
It's becoming successful, yeah, although it's a big challenge now. It started by ENISA, the European Network on Cyber Security, which is a European agency that initiated the Cyber Security Challenge. So our society identified this competition and attended to see what's going on. So back in 2017, 16 even, we participated for the first year at the European level. After that, it seemed that it's becoming very interesting, and we initiated the Cyprus Cyber Security Challenge.
What does that involve? Because you're targeting, I think, particularly young people from 14 on?
Yeah, exactly. So it's the rules of the European level competition that we are attracting 14-year-olds until 25-year-olds. So we're talking about high school students, university students, soldiers, and even some professionals that are still in the age limit that are talented in cybersecurity, what we refer to as hackers, but on the ethical approach.
So what sort of thing will the people who contact you to enter this competition be asked to do?
So there are many challenges. So imagine that cybersecurity is a very big sector, let's say, which is dealing with mobile applications, with network, with internet, with actual physical challenges, with cryptography, and very much everything we can imagine, even reverse engineering, which is identifying how someone thought of building a software and then trying to go back and find its gaps. So cybersecurity is all about identifying the issues faced in something that's on the internet and trying to fix them and close all the gaps.
Now, do we have computer lessons in our schools? Because particularly the younger section of the age group, where are they getting this talent or technology from, since I don't think we have full-scale IT lessons, let's say, in schools?
That's true, although nowadays it's starting to be more adapted by the ministry. So the ministry is implementing computer or, let's say, robotics and understanding what's programming at an early age, at elementary school now, but not to the level we are looking for. So at the end, we're looking for self-taught individuals that are into the theme of hacking. So trying to find the gap, solving a puzzle. So you need to have a lot of complexity in your mind on how to approach a topic.
Can I ask if there's any gender inequality in this? Are girls as good as boys at it?
So, on the second question, girls are as good as boys, but there is a gender gap. And the issue is that we have all these things in our mind. So when I tell you what's a hacker, probably the answer would be it's a man with a hoodie on a closed dark space with just a screen on with green letters, I would say. That suits probably what we have in mind as a hacker.
But that's the sort of prejudiced view, also assuming that all hackers are bad.
Exactly. So a usual example I have is one of our mentors, because we have plenty. She's a girl, a woman. She's married, she has family, she's working as a penetration tester, and she's doing her job as an ethical hacker. So no gap, or no basically difference between the gender.
But I was really meaning, did girls actually look to this field as something that they could do? Because that's the other thing, isn't it? It's the self-perception.
Exactly. We're trying to attack or to deal with this topic, to be open and attract girls as well, because a big percentage is boys and men.
Right, so what are these youngsters going to be required to do? Let's start with the Cyprus Cyber Security Challenge, because I think the winners of that are going to represent us in Europe. So how does it start? What do they start doing in March?
So someone to participate at the competition, they need to register first on www.ccsc.org.cy, or they can contact the Cyprus Computer Society via phone and register on the platform. So after that, they will have 15 days. So the competition will run online from the 1st until the 15th of March, where they have to deal with different online challenges.
That you will set them?
Yeah, the challenges are set by the mentors. We have around 35 currently mentors, which are professionals, volunteers on the competition, that they prepare and set up the challenges. So they need to solve as much as possible. They don't need to be the best on all the categories I mentioned before, like cryptography, reverse engineering, and everything else. But we're trying to identify individuals that they have a talent on that. So out of the participants, we need 10 people to prepare the team. We'll get more, around 15 we hope, or a bit more as well. And then from March until November, where the European Cybersecurity Challenge is taking place, we're going to train them. They're going to be set up as a team, and we're going to identify which are the best ones to represent Cyprus.
And so is it 10 that go from Cyprus to Europe?
Yeah. The rule says that there should be 10, 5 on the age of 14 to 20, and 5 from 21 to 25.
So they've got to get in touch as soon as possible, I guess, to register. In the past, how many people have expressed interest?
So we have a very good, let's say, escalation. So we started with 15, 16 people for the first year. Then last year we reached 100 participants. So we're hoping to get even better and more people to join in.
And I presume that even those who don't make the cut, as it were, get something out of it.
Yeah, it's very important to mention that there are many students usually that try to solve something for the first time. So we're giving them 15 days, because it used to be for 2 days, a full weekend. Now they have much more time to learn, because you're self-taught. So you need to search on the internet to learn how things are done, to see other challenges, how they approach, and try to solve it yourself.
And what about the Computer Society itself? Do you find that a lot of the people who go in for this end up joining your society? Do you offer lessons? What do you offer to people who are interested in IT?
So the Cyprus Computer Society is very active in the sector of IT, and starting from digital skills, from simple users up to really professionals and talented people. So we're organizing the computers Olympiad on informatics. We have the robotics competition, which is open to everyone interested from 6 years old until very old to compete. We have BEPRAS, which is computational thinking. We also do the ECDL certifications, and we go to schools, we talk to students and people and professionals. So anyone who studies computer science, computer engineering can join the society and be part of this big family.
And what about people who don't actually study it but have a talent for it?
So they can join and they can be part of the family as well.
Remind us again of the website where I'm sure all of this is down.
So it's on www.ccsc.org.cy.
And that is the project officer of the Cyprus Computer Society, Toumazi. If you're interested, look up the Cyprus Cyber Security Challenge. Well, that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. Many thanks for your company. Hope you'll join me next week. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.